I invite you to stand for the reading of the Gospel. It comes from the 6th chapter of Mark. We will skip around a bit. We will go from 30 to 34 and then 53 to 56. The apostles gathered around Jesus and told him all that they had done and taught. He said to them, "Come away to a deserted place all by yourselves and rest a while." For many were coming and going, and they had no leisure even to eat. And they went away in the boat to a deserted place by themselves. Now, many saw them going and recognized them. And they hurried there on foot from all the towns and arrived ahead of them. As Jesus went ashore, he saw a great crowd, and he had compassion for them because they were like sheep without a shepherd. And Jesus began to teach them many things. When they had crossed over, they came to the land of Gennesaret and moored the boat. When they got out of the boat, people at once recognized him and rushed about the whole region and began to bring the sick on mats to wherever they heard Jesus was. And wherever he went, into villages or cities or farms, they laid the sick in their marketplaces and begged him that they might touch even the fringe of his cloak. And all who touched it were healed. Friends, this is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. You may be seated. Our bodies seem to have a physical reaction to whenever we have emotions. Or at least we try to convey a physical connection like a metaphor when we are saying something in English or really in any language. When we are feeling happy or in love, we say our hearts are aflutter. When we are feeling nervous, we talk about we have butterflies in our stomach, or we notice that we have sweaty palms. When we hear shocking news, we say that it felt like a kick in the gut. Or we might even become dizzy and might need to sit down. When we see something deeply troubling or wrenchingly sad, we say we feel sick to our stomach. And sometimes we might even feel that nauseous. In the gospel lesson for today, there is one such expression, but we miss it because we're not reading it in the original Greek. As you may remember, a couple of weeks ago, we talked in the gospel about how Jesus sent out the disciples 2 by 2 to go teach and to heal and to stay in people's homes, remember, as they wandered around? Well, today's passage is the summary of when they came back. And they tell Jesus everything that they had done. And Jesus is so proud of them. I cannot think of another time when Jesus is more proud of all of his disciples for what they had done. And so he tells them, he urges them to get on the boat and tells them that they should go away and get some rest. Because he knows the demands of what they had been doing. He knows how busy they had been. And apparently they were so busy they weren't even having time to eat. And did you notice that when they jumped in the boat, the people recognized them? The people recognized the disciples because they had seen them in these towns doing the things that they were doing, and then they went out ahead of them and wanted to talk to them, to the disciples. It must have been such a proud moment for Jesus to have seen this kind of connection with the people. But it was supposed to be a vacation. It was supposed to be a retreat. The apostles needed a break. Jesus saw those people coming to see them, hoping for healing for themselves or their families. And Jesus felt something. And that's when the story says, Jesus saw a great crowd and he had compassion for them because they were like sheep without a shepherd. And that was it. Like I said, we would miss it. When the Bible says he had compassion for them, it's a translation of an expression in Greek that is something to the effect of Jesus felt his bowels move. I would bet you've never heard a sermon about our Lord's bowel movements. And yet that's what it is. It's their expression is connected to that deep in the gut. There's a dictionary that says that to be moved as to one's bowels was to be moved with compassion, to have compassion. And that phrase has a root literally in the word bowels, because in the Greek culture, the bowels were the seat of some violent emotions, strong emotions like anger and love. And for the Hebrews, it was seen as the seat of tender affections, especially kindness and benevolence and compassion. I should tell you that I carefully edited this sermon so as not to include all the intended and unintended puns that kept popping into my head as I was writing this. I kept going, no, I can't say that, I have to go back. What is clear in the passage is that Jesus was spiritually, personally connected to the people he was helping, both his disciples and the people who were coming to him for healing. The idea is that when he saw the crowds, it hit him really hard. In fact, that popular English Bible translation that we sometimes read, the Message, renders this passage saying, at the sight of them, his heart broke. I would almost say it was gut-wrenching for him to see them coming. It was just a very deep connection to them. And he was trying to get some rest for his disciples, but the crowds interrupted. And so it's even more clear how deeply Jesus felt connected to the people. You know, he could have done something else. They could have given him heartburn. He could have reached for some kind of spiritual Pepto-Bismol to put away this feeling. But he didn't. For Jesus, having compassion for the people comes from an idea of solidarity. He lived with the people whom he was healing. We believe that his presence, he was fully God and fully human. And we think of solidarity not as condescension, but as an emotional connection. He had come to be one of us, human beings. You know, he didn't sneak away every night to go back to heaven or on the weekends for a long weekend in heaven. He stayed with us. He was all in with us. And to be all in meant that he loved the people as his own. If we put ourselves in the role of the disciples, whom Jesus was training for continuing his ministry, we do well to pay attention to that emotional and spiritual connection of the people we support or care about. Ministry, in a very large measure, is about compassion and solidarity for the poor, for the sick, for the lonely, for the marginalized. Jesus reaching out to people of every status. Jesus reached out to people of every status in first century Palestine. He met with kings as well as people who were lepers. But if you read all of the work that he did, he was particularly focused with those people whom society had pushed to the side for whatever reason. He saw them. He felt their pain. It was in a sense of feeling sorry for them, but it was a connection to their plight. And that perspective led not just to healing, but to relationship. I was at a community meeting recently dealing with how we care for the poor in our community. And the subject was raised of having a poverty simulation. Those are structured exercises in which a group of people, maybe it could be church leaders, it could be leaders of a social service agency, gather for a few hours and think about what it's like to be poor. It's a simulation, so it's like a game where participants are given roles to play and given very specific instructions to take on the role or the character or the reality of people living in poverty and going through a variety of challenges. And then to try to live in a simulated way what it's like to have these cards dealt to you and try to make it in society. I suppose that there is value to come to terms with a variety of situations, of catch-22 situations that people in poverty encounter, opening our eyes maybe to the difficulties that they have. But what I can't stomach about playing a simulation like this is that within a few blocks, we could have a conversation with real live human beings for whom this is not a game. Why don't we just go and chat with them? Why don't we just go and have lunch with them and learn from them about what it feels like and what they go through and how they can show us a different way to see society? I even asked the people in that conversation about the simulation. I said, so will there be actual poor people guiding us through this exercise? And they mumbled some answer that told me that they did not understand what I was trying to object to. Our stomach ought to turn at the sight of people being denigrated, dehumanized, marginalized. The sight of elderly people weighing the choice between buying food or buying medicine. The thought of children living with parents who are addicted to meth. The idea of a food pantry being necessary for survival, only because our elected officials keep cutting food stamps, cynically judging those who are poor as being lazy. This is a gut check for us as followers of Jesus. When we see the crowds coming, or when we realize that we are all surrounded with people who are in need, what would we feel compassion? And how will we feel that compassion? We live in privilege, you and I. We benefit from circumstances that grant us distance from these gut-wrenching realities. We get the privilege of looking away. We are able to walk away because we are white or wealthy or straight or educated or connected. See, Jesus came from privilege. But he used this privilege as a tool to benefit the crowd. He used his power for healing, not for boosting his position. He used his knowledge to combat misinterpretations of the Bible, not to look smart. It was solidarity with the people which was at the core of his compassion, a solidarity that was about relationships, about being in the journey together. Whether we are planning a mission trip, preparing hot meals on Fridays, or fighting for affordable housing, our role as a Christian community is to connect with the people in a real and sustainable way. We meet them letting go of our preconceived notions of poverty or illness or racism. We meet with them to learn from them, to be in solidarity, to be in relationship. We let their stories move us. And more importantly, change us. Not so that we come home thinking, how blessed I am that I don't have to worry about the safety of my drinking water, but rather outrage at the reality that this is an actual concern in Flint and in a Native American reservation. We lift our voice so that the voices of those who are drowned out can be heard. We pick up their cause in solidarity because now is our cause too. If in our effort to follow Jesus, Compassion is not messy, inconvenient, costly, scary, renewing, empowering, revolutionary, and life-changing. And we're not doing it right. Thanks be to God for God's word for us. Amen.